Alright, I'm back with another Destiny 2 video. I was waiting to see if the TWAB had anything in it in order to add to the Solo Ops developer insight post that we got yesterday, and no, there's not really anything in there. They have like a very brief blurb that Destiny Rising exists, and they talk about tonics briefly, but the big news is in these developer insight things that they're usually releasing on Wednesdays. This one I found pretty interesting as they were explaining something that they sort of showed off in the previews, which is Solo Ops, a new kind of activity that they have not had before. I was obviously thinking of something like Solo Lost Sectors, but it appears to be a little more involved than that, and they're sort of trying to do something where if you just want to jump into Destiny and make a little progress by yourself in a short amount of time, this is something that can do that. So I'm going to go through and read this and kind of offer thoughts on the way. I'll start with the TLDR. Solo Ops are a 10-minute mission that can be completed by single players or fire teams. They are low-commitment options that still allow you to use the challenge customization to make progress toward better gear. They are being built for their experiences to stay fresh across repeated plays. So that is where it differentiates from a Lost Sector, where you sort of get Lost Sectors down to a science, back when I used to farm them when I actually needed to get the new armor exotic for the season. But this is not going to be like that. This is going to be a little more dynamic, and they get into that later on. The problem, they love this format. Over the last few years, we've built on the promise of Destiny as a game where you can come together with other Guardians and enjoy the game together. We've built a lot of new match-made activities from Battlegrounds to Onslaught and rolled out features like Fireteam Finder to make it easier than ever to group up with other people. We've watched our community come together like never before, and that's great. Sometimes you just want to jump in and play for 10 or 20 minutes and feel like it was worth your time. Right now, your only options for doing so either put you in direct competition with other players, Crucible and Gambit. Is that 10 or 20 minutes worth your time? I guess that's a matter of debate. Or you can feel like you're in a race to finish against your own Fireteam members, Strikes, and Battlegrounds. Yeah. The activities best suited to solo players are time-consuming. Story missions can take half an hour or more to complete. Do people really run random story missions? I know they have like rewards for them sometimes, but yeah. Lost Sectors require you to go into the destination to play them, and jumping into multiplayer activities as a solo player, for example, soloing a dungeon, can be stressful and take even more time than the activity would with a fire team. True. I feel like most things would take longer solo than with a fire team, but okay. We identified a gap in our offerings, short activities that lone players can take at their own pace. Just to start here, I think this is a gap that I am excited to see filled. This seems like something sort of aimed at me in my current stage of life, where I am now a dad, and oftentimes I do not have even the hour and 10 minutes it takes for a 50-wave Onslaught run, so something I can jump into and theoretically make some sort of progress towards an upgrade in some sense seems like a good idea. They're right in that there really is nothing like that now, because like what are you going to do? Like 2 games of Gambit, 1 Crucible match, like what is that really getting you? So if this is something that's more interesting and more rewarding than just a solo Lost Sector, I am in support of that kind of idea. The solution. Solo Ops are activities aimed at short playtimes and manageable for solo players. They will be launched from the portal and have a target-based playtime of 10 minutes. Each Solo Ops activity emphasizes the fun of Destiny's combat action gameplay. Also, 10 minutes is like a lot more than most Legend Master Lost Sectors you run, because you get those down to a science, and they're not that long at baseline. They're like, I don't know, 2 or 3 micro small encounters usually with a boss and some champions. 10 minutes is like a strike. I mean, I know some strikes go longer than that, but a fast strike, so that's a pretty significant time increase from solo Lost Sectors. Granted, I'm sure people are going to speedrun these very quickly too in some form or another, but a target play time of 10 minutes is interesting, because that's definitely not how Lost Sectors work. All right. Emphasizes the fun of Destiny's action gameplay, presenting players with straightforward objectives that focus on gunplay. Solo Ops missions aren't intended to be the intense tests of build crafting prowess or thumb skill. Instead, we want them to be able to focus on the joy of playing Destiny's action sandbox in a way that's easy to jump into and play in just a few minutes. Solo Ops will support scoring and challenge customization like many of our activities. As such, they will allow players to make incremental progress toward better and more powerful gear. and support customizing the difficulty of the activity with a wide variety of modifiers. You'll still want to play well in solo ops. Your score will contribute to the quality of your loot, but we're trying to construct these missions so that getting a good score is a matter of moving, shooting, and looting rather than being determined by what loadout and build you bring into them. So, with the modifiers, if you're doing all these different modifiers, so much of modifiers is sort of dictating what your build is, whether it's burns or overcharges or whatever they're called, and so are there going to be different modifiers for this where they're not going to like theoretically kind of restrict you into relatively few loadouts? Are there champions in these? I feel like there aren't going to be champions in these if they're trying to do like a broad loadout, because there's like 2 or 3 types of guns you can use for any given champion at a given time. So I would be curious to see if these actually do have champions, maybe on like the highest levels, but I prefer they have those, just whatever they're called, the Diablo things with modifiers on them that shoot fireballs and stuff at you. And speaking of Diablo, that leads into the next section. Mission variability. Another goal of solo ops is to create activities with higher variability between plays. So you'll be playing these missions as a way of making progress toward better gear. We are trying to make sure they stay fresh longer and are making them less predictable in what content you see. For example, at this time we're aiming to have each mission come with a variant of at least 2 combatant factions, each one with a unique objective associated with it. Solo ops missions will sometimes come with optional goals that only present themselves once you're in the activity, like the presence of a treasure goblins, or passageways to secret rooms opening when they are normally closed. We're also scattering random treasure chests throughout the activity, and finding them will get you a bonus to your final score. Okay, so this is Diablo. They're making Diablo Nightmare Dungeons, essentially. For those of you who don't play Diablo, these are procedurally generated dungeons that throw kind of hordes of enemies at you, and along the way you are like asked to do some sort of objective, like take a stone to a pedestal to open a door. Some of the newer ones they've done recently have sort of little side objectives where you can go and open treasure rooms. There are chests scattered around. The phrase treasure goblin is directly taken from Diablo, as far as I know. And the difference here is like this isn't going to be procedurally generated geometry. This is going to be a set location, but it very much seems like they're following that pathway to create something a little more dynamic. Probably a little more dynamic, honestly, than Diablo, because Diablo does not really have that much variability within each dungeon. However, there are like 100 dungeons, so there's not going to be that many solo ops here. So. Okay, one piece of activity tech we've been working to build for these missions is a dynamic enemy spawning system. This system runs behind the scenes, monitoring how well you're doing, how long it's been since you've been in combat, and how close you're getting to your objective, and then spawn squads of enemies when the system determines you need to be challenged. Unlike our other activities where enemy spawn cadence and locations are often very scripted, solo ops missions will spawn enemies at unpredictable times from places you may not expect them to be. So this sort of negates the whole lost sector memorization idea where you just sort of get those down to a science where, okay, there's these many guys here, there's this champion here, there's this other champion over here, and like this is the best thing I should do for this boss when I get in this room in between waves of enemies. Like you're not really in theory going to be able to do that as much with this system if they're going to dynamically adjust enemies. This is not really something we've seen in Destiny. Almost all spawns and things in Destiny are pretty predetermined in almost all activities. So I'm very curious how this works, and like when the system determines you need to be challenged, like what is that? Like if you're doing too well, they're just gonna like throw a mini boss at you. That's kind of interesting. It reminds me of Left 4 Dead a little bit, but I'm certainly curious to see how that goes. Visiting exciting locations. Since solo ops are part of the core game that is free to play for everyone, we also wanted to take advantage of the fact that across the game there are many locations that are either not used in free content or are underused despite being a fun place to play. A lot of beautiful, exciting spaces play host to only a single story mission, and players have no reason to go to those places outside of that mission. Some, like the Solsworks area on EDZ, are currently entirely unused. I do not remember what that area is. Okay. These are awesome, uniquely Destiny spaces, and we think solo ops is a great venue for going back and visiting some of these places that may not have gotten as much attention as their craftsmanship deserves. Solo ops missions will take you into spaces you may have visited before, but the new objectives and dynamic enemy spawning system help to make the experience feel both fresh and familiar. For many players, solo ops missions may be the first time you go to those locations, and we think everyone should have a chance to experience these iconic spaces. So a lot of this stuff, like a lot of this early story mission stuff from Red War, got removed. So I'm sort of wondering where exactly these kind of things are, because they're, the most obvious thing would be like some sort of lost sector that they modify into this new thing. But that might be too short, and it seems like these are going to be modified campaign mission areas. Like obviously you're not running a full campaign mission, but that seems to be the general idea here, that you're reusing those spaces that you do not normally go to for any significant reason, or areas you can't even reach. What they don't talk about here, I don't think, is how many of these there are going to be. Are there going to be 4? Are there going to be 12? This seems like something they'd obviously add to in time, but at the start here, we don't really have an idea of how many they're going to give us here. Overall, we hope solo missions will be a good activity for players who only have a short amount of time to play, prefer to play by themselves, or are looking for a lower intensity way to revel in the Destiny gameplay sandbox, as well as any combination of those 3. FAQ. Can you only play them solo, or can they be played in a fire team? Solo ops activities will accommodate up to 3-player fire teams, because we never want to tell you you can't play with your friends. We are working on a system to automatically scale the difficulty of the encounters based on your size. That doesn't may launch with that, I guess. However, if you want to play with other people, fire team ops are going to offer the more efficient path to getting better gear. I see. So you want to play the normal fire team ops as opposed to solo ops, I guess. So solo ops is not efficient to getting better gear. That's what I'm reading here. Will solo ops support matchmaking? No. If you want to play with other people, fire team ops is the only way to go. So if you want to play solo ops with your friends, you have to like do a pre-made fire team. You can't. There's no just like matchmaking for solo ops. I mean, I get that. I'm not quite clear on why they let 3 people play these at all if it's quote solo ops, but sure, why not? I mean, I guess you can do quote solo lost sectors with a fire team, but your rewards are like not nearly as much. This is not implying to me that your rewards will be reduced, so that's an interesting system. Will solo ops include champions, Bane's specific modifier? Oh, they do ask this. Okay, I missed this. We haven't locked down any specific set of modifiers they were going to support in solo ops. We can't just use the same modifiers as, say, strikes, because we're aiming at a tight experience solo players can enjoy, and we want to make sure the modifiers we allow don't push the missions away from that experience. We do plan to support Banes, yeah, that's what those are called, as we think they offer an exciting way to increase the variety of experiences you have across multiple plays. Yeah, this is what I was saying earlier, is like there's so many modifiers that are based around loadout specifically, where, this damage type you're weak to, so you need these mods to defend. These types of weapons or elements have a burn, and you're handicapping yourself, by 25% if you're not using them. These champions mean you need to use one of these 2 types of weapons, if that. Those do not really jive with the idea here. Like, you don't need to worry about your loadout as much. You can just kind of go in and wreck stuff. And so I would be curious if they had those types of modifiers. They've introduced all these like really weird modifiers that are sort of making their rounds on Twitter, where it's like doing damage with these types of weapons reduces their damage until you switch to another type of weapon, and like Savathun gives you a worm and it like increases your recovery unless you feed it, and then it hurts you. Like I think they're testing a lot of these out for something like this, because those are not really loadout dependent. So whatever ones kind of survive the trials here, they may end up going into here. So I like this. I think this is a good concept for a space in which to have a activity that we don't really have. I really do enjoy doing solo lost sectors to a certain extent, if they were more rewarding, I guess, or like I was gonna tweet earlier today. I didn't, but I would prefer they just go back to putting the new armor pieces inside solo lost sectors to run and farm those and try to get the armor. This whole like rank up Rahul thing is really annoying, and I don't like it. It just, I don't think it's nearly as good as, running solo lost sectors was not perfect, but I think it was more interesting than this. And when you get, some of those lost sectors are really annoying to solo, but when you get a good one, I think it's a lot of fun to sort of, develop your strategy and figure out how fast you can do them, stuff like that. So maybe that'll be sort of the same thing here, with perhaps even less restrictive loadouts. So it sounds good to me. We'll have to see how it works in practice, but this is one addition in Frontiers that I think sounds potentially cool. So we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.